Please stand clear of the doors. Por favor, manténganse alejado de las puertas.
Hello and welcome everyone to episode 5 of Monorail Memoirs, and this week we are discussing the best ride at Walt Disney World. It's going to be a bit of a debate about this. The way in which it's going to work is we're going to talk about our top 3 from 3, 2, 1. We'll have a little bit of a conversation about, is it classic, is it modern, is there a thrill factor to it, is there a nostalgia factor to it, and everything up to and including the technology in the ride as well. But as always, before we start, Lauren, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. I've got my brew in a lovely mug that I've had for years and years and years.
We're all mad here.
We
A
are
quote
indeed.
from Alice in Wonderland.
Yes, I got the Mad Hatter on the other side.
Excellent, excellent. Happy days.
That
And I
makes
see
me very happy.
your jumper there as well is a Walt Disney World themed jumper.
Yeah.
I must confess I've gone back to the running theme this week with the Goofy, which for those who don't know, the Goofy is the half marathon and the marathon at the Walt Disney World run. Yes, I know, I did both. I did the Dopey as well, so it was the 5K, 10K, half marathon. And actually I have a 19-mile run to do tomorrow just for the sake of it, because I'm building towards a 50K in Vero Beach in summer. But the reason I bring that up is because I'll be staying at the Vero Beach DVC Resort, a little hidden gem on the east coast of Florida, and I'll bring you some updates from that as and when it happens. But until then, however, we're going to talk today about the best ride at Walt Disney World. I can say with honesty, we have not corroborated on this. We don't know how this list is going to work out. We all know my favorite attraction, so that's not a surprise. But this is for all of the parks, and we're going to get straight into it then. So Lauren, in terms of number 3 on your list, what is your third favorite attraction at Walt Disney World?
Yeah, so I have really struggled with this list, actually, just for a bit of background. Over the past few weeks, I've been like, yes, that is my list. Yes, that is 100%. And then I think, but what about this one? So to kick it off, I'm going to say my number 3 is Expedition Everest.
Ooh, I'm gonna write these down because I'm interested. I'm gonna write these down. Number 3, Expedition Everest. Go on.
So obviously it's, I don't know how old it is now. It must be about 15 years old now or something like that.
Yeah, it's 15, 20 years old.
Yeah, but I remember it coming out, and I remember it being this massive thrill ride that went backwards, and it was like, oh my goodness, there's a ride that goes backwards, and a massive Yeti that was meant to move.
I was going to bring that up actually, but you beat me to it. The Yeti that doesn't move because it's structurally too stressing on the actual foundation of the ride itself, which is a little bit.
But when it did move, it was ace.
Okay. Yeah.
And I don't know, it mixes for me thrill with immersive, aspects. I mean, I've never been to the Himalayas, but I feel like I'm there. I feel like I'm, kind of near Mount Everest and stuff. Like, I think the theming is second to none. Even down to the queue, looking at all of the different artifacts from the Sherpas. Absolutely love that. And actually listening to Joe Roddy when he was like looking at how to make this attraction and looking at all the artifacts, it was just so interesting to hear about the background of it as well. So yeah, I think a lot of effort went into the theming of the ride, the research, and it is a really, really good thrill ride.
I give you a lot of credit actually, because the queue is actually one of my favorite queues at Walt Disney World. We do have an episode tabled for the future on our favorite queues at Walt Disney World, which is a very niche topic, I accept. But for those who are interested, it will be a good one. And I actually think Expedition Everest is certainly up there with some of the best. The thrill factor, I completely agree. I think it has a great thrill factor to it, and I would actually probably put it in the top maybe 4 rides across all of Walt Disney World for its thrill capacity. Going back is great. I do have a bit of a question though. By your own admission, the Yeti doesn't work in the way that it used to. I mean, is it when it came out, it was fantastic. Is it really worth the 3rd spot? Because I don't know what your other ones are, but if that's your number 1 roller coaster, I don't know if it's the best roller coaster in Walt Disney World.
Yeah, so for me, it was a toss-up between Everest and Rock and Roller Coaster. But for me, it was just that theming that really got me there. You know, yes, you can do a thrill ride, but anyone can do a thrill ride. You know, Alton Towers here do thrill rides. You know, Flamingo Land, whatever. But it's, for me, you don't go to Disney for the thrill. You go to Disney for the theming and that immersion.
That's a really good point, actually, and that is one of the things that separates Walt Disney World apart from other theme parks, not just in the US but across the world. The idea of theming, immersion, sightlines always used to be a really big topic, which is less so in recent years. But the idea that when you're in that specific land, you are in that specific land, and next week's episode, I think, actually covers a little bit of that. So we'll save some of that for then. I don't disagree with Everest as being a top 3 ride. I think once upon a time I might have had Everest top 3 as well. My third place choice, I'll be honest, Lauren, I've cheated a bit here. The reason I've cheated, or the way in which I've cheated, is it's a ride that does exist and is in Walt Disney World, but it goes away and comes back now and again. Soarin' is my number 3, but specifically Soarin' over California.
The original.
Yes. So for those that don't know, Soarin' has changed. Soarin' used to be Soarin' over California in Epcot. That was a carbon copy of the one that was in Disneyland in California. And then a few years ago, it became Soarin' Around the World.
With the leaning Eiffel Tower.
Oh, I was in Epcot recently, and what Lauren is talking about is soaring around the world. You go over various different, landmarks throughout the world. The pyramids being one of them, Taj Mahal being another, and the Eiffel Tower in Paris. However, all of this, unlike the original that had a little bit of CGI, this is all basically CGI. And it's just terrible unless you are sat dead straight in that middle section, middle of the row. Anything to the left and right of arc is poor. So I was in effectively the bottom row towards the far left. And what it meant is that as we approached the Eiffel Tower, rather than the Eiffel Tower being this straight object you would expect, it curves at the top. And it's not like, oh, it's a little bit that I've noticed. No, it looks like it's turning 45 degrees to the right. And you just think, how was this signed off that is an acceptable product to put forward in front of the consumer? Which is why, for me, Soaring over California, perhaps it's a little bit of nostalgia speaking, but when they brought it back a few years ago and we did it, that was fantastic then. I think it has a real thrill factor to it, that sort of immersion and the elevation format that gives you this sort of feeling of flight. I think the ride technology itself is fantastic. I rather enjoy, if I'm honest, the pre-flight briefing, which I know sounds a little bit silly, but it's a little bit of the experience. And so my number 3, I have cheated. For me, it is Soaring, but it's Soaring over California specifically.
So I've got a few questions for you on that one. Obviously, this came out many, many years ago, and technology has significantly updated.
Well, you say that, but Soaring over the world's shuffling awful.
I mean, it is. But do you not think? What do you think about the quality of the video?
I think the quality is fantastic. No, I see what you're saying. I think if what they had done is done Soaring over California round 2, without as much gimmicky stuff, and I appreciate the scene, whether at the PGA Tour golf course, and he hits the golf ball towards you. Yes, that is gimmicky. I get it, but it's kind of a thing. Whereas when you look at the animals that they use in Soaring Around the World, and they're just CGI elephants and stuff, you think, well, really, what's the point? So I get what you're saying. I do. I would have liked to have seen an updated Soaring over California versus a whole new Soaring platform that just, to me, doesn't really work. So yeah, I'll buy that, but I'm not. I'm sticking with Soaring over California. That marks number 3s then. Number 2, Lauren, what's your second on your list of favorite best rides at Walt Disney World?
Yeah, so I, again, have had a few for this spot, but I think the one that really trumps it is Haunted Mansion. In the Magic
Carry
Kingdom.
on.
Obviously, we know that that's an old favourite. It's not the biggest thrill ride, it's not the best in terms of technology. It's not the best in terms of anything, really. But the nostalgic factor for me is just what carries it through. I understand that, yes, I know that when he's in the tomb and he's creaking upwards, it looks really jittery. And in the graveyard scene, it all looks a little bit, you can hear the animatronic pistons firing. It's not the best quality. But it's classic Disney dark ride, and that's what I'm there for.
I very much, I think it fits right into that classic category. It's a must-do every time. It's checking for the wait time of being 13 minutes, just because the thrill of that. For those who don't get that reference, when there is a less than 10-minute wait time at Haunted Mansion, they will put the wait time as 13 minutes because it's kind of like that feeling around number 13, around ghosts, Haunted Mansion. I think it's really good. The ride technology is nothing too fantastic. The queue experience is pretty decent, I think. The opening scene where you're stood in a room and there's this chamber has no windows and no doors. Your challenge to find a way out. Of course, there's always my way. I've listened to that too many times. I'm one of those annoying people. I'm not as bad as I used to be.
Yeah.
But there's those annoying people who, like us, know that script and they will stand in the room and they will say it in time, sometimes slightly ahead, but say it in time with the actual audio that's playing. And that's really quite annoying. I've got to the point where I just mouth it now rather than actually say it, because I appreciate that for somebody's first experience, that could be distracting or even spoil it for them slightly. Haunted Mansion being second, I think, is a great shout. It's a classic ride. It's it's not so much immersion per se, but I do think that it gets you into the story. The idea of 999 happy haunts. Do you remember when you were followed out of Haunted Mansion?
I was about to say this. It's not only the classic Disney dark ride that I love, it's the cast members who are assigned to that ride must have some sort of acting degree, because they are fantastic. They are really good. And to be miserable at Disney takes a lot. And all of the cast members are just absolutely fantastic. And yes, so when I think I must have been about 10 or something like that, and it was dark, it was nighttime, it was literally just before the fireworks, we thought, right, we'll just try and get one last ride in. Haunted Mansion was at 13 minutes, so we were like, yep, great, walk on. Came out of the ride and he followed me through to Fantasyland. For those who don't know where that is, it's quite a way. You have to go kind of up a bit of a level and keep walking to the point where you couldn't see the ride anymore. And he was constantly following me. I was convinced that was it. That was me meeting my maker. That was the end.
My favorite bit of that, though, is when he hit what would be the start of Fantasyland. He just started like marching on the spot as if an invisible force field was preventing him from going further forward. So I remember that, and I thought that was a great little anecdote. That took that cast member 2 or 3 minutes to do, and it's something that us 20 years later still talking about. So I think that is fantastic. Haunted Mansion, you know what? I agree. I can't be upset with Haunted Mansion being in your top 3 at all. I think it's a great ride, and I don't blame you. My number two, however.
Yeah.
We're staying in Epcot.
Oh.
As you know, Epcot's the best park at Walt Disney World. But we're staying in Epcot for Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind.
I knew that was going to make an appearance.
Yeah, honestly, everything from the pre-show briefing where you've got out. Let's be clear here: the storyline is absolutely nonsense, but they've thrown it together. It doesn't fit anywhere within the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but they've thrown it together to sort of make it kind of work. Because the criticism I have leveled on this ride before is this is not a Guardians of the Galaxy ride. This could be anything. you could make this, if you wanted to re-theme it differently, you could make this a Spider-Man ride. Notwithstanding the issue being east of the Mississippi River and the contractual problems between Universal using Spider-Man and Walt Disney World. But the point is, it could easily be a Spider-Man ride. You just theme it differently. Could easily be a whole Avengers ride. You just theme it differently. So there's nothing intrinsic about the ride that makes it Guardians of the Galaxy-esque. However, everything from the ride technology to the soundtrack, which, you know, there's one of 6 songs, by the way, and so every time you go on it, you might get a different one. The soundtracks are good. The ride is so smooth. Your experience through the ride is incredibly smooth. You know, it's fast as well. I think, for me, I have often said, if Space Mountain was built today, it would be that ride. That's what it is in terms of that dark ride in a building, but also a real cornerstone of experience. You know, how is it going to survive going forwards? Will it continue? You know, new iterations, will new stories be told? I don't know, but the tech is there, the music is there, the experience is there. I actually cannot fault the ride itself.
I can't argue with that. You're totally right. The ride itself, the actual experience is fantastic. And obviously with the different soundtracks, again, as you say, it adds that little bit of, oh, what soundtrack are we going to get this time? You know, for those Disney buffs who have been on it multiple times, it does raise that question. And so for that, I do agree. But for me, it is just that theming. You know, it could just be anything. It could be anything of any matter of Marvel, or it doesn't even need to be Marvel. It literally could have any overlay on it and still make sense and still be a good ride. Is that inherently Disney?
Well, you know, that's a really good question now, but we've discussed before the IP heavy nature of the last 10, 15, 20 years. You know, again, if Space Mountain had never existed and was built today, you could call this Space Mountain and it would still work. It really would. So you're right in saying that you're right to question, is this a Disney product? The answer, with how Marvel is tying in, especially other Disney theme parks like Disney California Adventure, like Disneyland Paris, the answer I would say is yes. It is the modern Disney approach, but it is not that classic new style, that classic new story that isn't linked to other products. You know, Figment is a great example of a ride that came out of nowhere with no links to previous product settings, previous IP, as where now, you know, if a Figment ride, we don't get new style Figment rides. We can talk about Figment another time, I'm sure, but we don't get new style Figment rides. We get new style Guardians rides or Frozen rides or Encanto rides. So you're right in saying, is it losing a little bit of its Disney aura, perhaps? But it's still my number 2, which moves us on, Lauren, to number 1s. Now, I'm pretty sure I know what your number 1 is because you mentioned it before. But what is your number 1 ride in Walt Disney World?
It's the Safari in Animal Kingdom.
Kilimanjaro Safari.
Yeah, I just absolutely love it. The wait time has gone up for it, I believe, recently. You know, you used to be able to wait sort of 30, 40 minutes for it. Now it's getting kind of like an hour and over. So that does kind of leave it a bit lacking. However, it's just those animals at the end, you know. I just absolutely love it. And I know that obviously you've just stayed at Animal Kingdom Lodge, which is one of the places where I would love to stay at one time in my life. But yeah, I feel like obviously you are in Disney, you're in a theme park, but you completely transport yourself away from that and, you know, to, you know, Kilimanjaro Safari, you know, you feel like you're there. Obviously, there have been different iterations of it. You know, there's been slight changes to the story. I think that obviously the original story with the poachers and stuff like that was a little bit difficult. You know, and especially as a kid, you know, it was a little bit scary at times. But I think that the iteration of it prior to this one was probably the best because you still got I don't know if you've ever been on it, listeners, but when you going through it, there is a bridge over some alligators, and the bridge used to wobble. And you used to get that feeling of, oh, are we going to fall in? Are we going to fall in? And it just give it a little bit of something extra than just kind of going around the safari, but didn't have that whole poachers element to it. But yeah, that is my favourite, I would say.
It is a long ride as well.
It is.
When I did it a couple of weeks ago, it was about 22 minutes. So whilst, yes, you are investing a lot of time in the wait for it, the actual attraction itself is quite a lengthy attraction. It's not a Peter Pan's flight that's over within a couple of minutes. It's a lengthy attraction. You're right. The knowledge of the cast members who are driving is always fantastic. It's never the same twice. You get to see so many different animals. The story you mentioned about the poachers was interesting because it used to be that you had Big Red and Little Red, which were two elephants, and they were supposedly being hunted by poachers. It was a little bit of a dark story, really, when you think that this is an educational family-style attraction. So they moved away from that and far more towards the standard. This is a safari, and you'll also find that any alligator jokes don't exist anymore in most of the Walt Disney World attractions after, oh goodness, it's maybe 10 years ago now. There was a young boy at the Grand Floridian who was attacked and unfortunately died after an incident with an alligator. So they don't make alligator and crocodile jokes in the way that they used to, understandably. I can't be mad at Kilimanjaro Safari as number one. My wife would agree with you entirely. It's a real crown in the Walt Disney World jewel, and I would actually argue that it is possibly for some people the highlight of their trip to Walt Disney World. What's coming next? Listeners, if you've been paying any attention to the preceding episodes that we have done here, my favorite ride, and I will explain this thoroughly, don't worry. But my favorite ride is the Carousel of Progress. Why is my favorite ride the Carousel of Progress? It's my favorite ride because it was Walt's idea from start to finish. The New York 1964-65 World's Fair. It has his hands all over it in terms of the storytelling, the depths of the characters, the way in which we are allowed to interpret, the material in front of us. The Sherman Brothers, the iconic duo, wrote There's a Great Big Beautiful Tomorrow. When I did my Dopey Run Disney series, I only stopped for a handful of photos the whole time. You can stop nearly every mile for photos of different characters. I wasn't bothered, not least because if I stopped, I wasn't sure my legs would get going again. But I stopped, I believe it was the 10K. I stopped to take a selfie with the sign outside the front of the Carousel of Progress because I was that committed to it as a ride. There has been a lot of accurate criticism in recent years, and no more so is that evident in the final scene. The final scene, as you rotate around the theatre, as you pass through the 1900s, the 1920s, the 1940s, and then to seemingly 2000s, around now, really. They talk about car phones as thing of the future. Well, that's not a thing. Laser discs, high-def TVs, and they say it as if it's this brand new futuristic style, and it's just a little bit painful, I'll be honest. That final scene is a little bit painful, but the good news for fans of the Carousel of Progress is at one point in time it was reduced to seasonal only activity, meaning that it was only open during the busiest times of the year. That is no longer the case. It is open full-time, year-round, so at any time of year you can go and enjoy the greatest attraction in Walt Disney World. Lauren, you're shaking your head. Go on.
I understand that it's got Walt Disney all over it. It was his baby, 64 World's Fair, all that sort of good stuff. I just think that things can still be nostalgic, but also brought up to date, less clunky, and I don't know. For me, it's a nice grab of AC when it's a boiling hot day in August.
That's very true.
It's a nice ride with catchy songs in it. but not much else really for me. It's the nostalgia, yeah, I get it, but I think it's just with everything else changing and with everything else being updated, it's just looking very, very tired. And I think that it shows that the Walt Disney Company might not see it as fondly as some of its fans because it is being left. It's down sometimes more so than it used to be. You'd see videos online popping up of animatronics not working and them just continuing the ride anyway because there was only 10 people in the theatre. It's that sort of Disney-ness.
I understand. I really do. And I can't get upset or too upset when people say they're not a fan of Carousel of Progress. But we talk about classic. We talk about nostalgia. You don't get much more classic or much more nostalgic than that. You are intimately entwined in a story that Walt himself not just had a hand in, but ran the whole thing. So as a fan favorite, the Carousel of Progress for me has to be number one. Lauren, we're going to draw stumps there. And just as a quick recap then, my three in order 1, 2, 3 are the Carousel of Progress. Number 2 is Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind. And number 3 is Soaring over California specifically. Your top 3 as number 1's Kilimanjaro Safari, 2's Haunted Mansion, 3's Expedition Everest. Honestly, I can't get mad. I really can't. If you said to me, you're going to Disney for a day and the only 3 rides you're doing are Kilimanjaro Safari, Haunted Mansion, and Expedition Everest, I wouldn't be sad. With that said then, Lauren, thank you very much for your help this week. For those of you who want to follow us on social media, our handles across the bottom are at Monorail Memoirs for TikTok and Instagram. Our email, and I will get it right this week rather than falling over my words. Our email is monorailmemoirs@gmail.com. If you have any thoughts, comments, or queries, feel free to email us or drop something in the Instagram comments section. It has been a pleasure having you all here again this week. Laura and I will see you again next week. And as always, please stand clear of the doors. Thanks very much, everybody. Bye-bye.